behave. You're on the air.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you got my good side, right?
Looks great. Yeah.
I'm vain. Let me know when you're ready over there, Brian. No problem. All righty. Hello, everyone. This is Lewis Gibb again, following up from last week where we went over web page design. Today, we're going to follow it up and, oh, no problem. Is that better? All right, fantastic. All right, this is Lewis Gibb again. I'll start over my little welcome speech. Thank you for joining us. We're following up from last week's session where we're going over website design, and now we're going to be going over graphic design. Graphic design encompasses web design, of course, but also page layouts, logo designs, and everything that goes into designing a brochure, newsletters, posters, any kind of signage whatsoever. This ties into, of course, a company's brand and how a company is represented. So it's extremely important to sit back and think about how does your actual brand fit into the work that you're doing as far as graphic design is concerned. There's several different career choices also when it comes to graphic design. You know, you can actually be a graphic designer, a visual designer, someone that focuses specifically in 3D artwork, someone that focuses on only web design. But in the end, it's all about having the right framework and the right base of tools and experience. So what we're going to be going over in this class today is everything that's necessary for this. Like last time, I'm going to be taking questions. This time, we're going to be taking it a little bit different. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and take your questions section by section, so that way we can spend a little bit more time answering specific questions that are geared towards the section that we're covering at that time. So please, if you do happen to have any questions, let the moderators know. They'll send me over a question, and then I'll go ahead and answer it as we continue with the class. So what is graphic design? Graphic design is a visual representation of your brand, of your company. Like we were discussing last week, your brand is actually what you go to market with. That encompasses what you actually do, what your business does. Things you want to consider when you're talking about a brand and graphic design is, does this image, whatever the image happens to be, it could be a newsletter, it could be a brochure, it could be a poster. As I look around in this office here, I see a PA Cyber charter school poster. I see signage that goes over the buzz at PA Cyber. I also see a banner here that's used probably for trade shows and stuff. So from that perspective, all of those things have the same look and feel. It's a unified vision, and that's what you should be going for with all of your graphic design work. Graphic design uses desktop publishing tools. What does that mean? Well, typically in the past, I'll give you a little history about myself. I actually started doing graphic design over 20 years ago. I know, I'm an old man. But what that means is I actually didn't have computers to do the things that you guys are able to do now. So I had to actually lay out everything by hand. That meant doing my own typography. Typography is typefaces. the fonts that are on an actual brochure. To get started, of course, you can work in programs like Word, PowerPoint. Those are easy desktop publishing tools that allow you to do some things to give a nice representation. So along with the fonts, you also wind up having to worry about the image choices, color schemes. And we're talking about complementary colors. We're talking about things that do not detract from the overall design of what you're doing. Now, there are many different things that we need to worry about in graphic design. It has to communicate a message. So if you're designing a brochure or a newsletter or a website or whatever the case may be, that should be thought of and considered to be part of your messaging. So does this particular piece that you're creating, does it fit with what you're trying to do? Okay, does it fit with your messaging? Does it fit with the message of the actual piece as well? If you're going to a trade show that's meant to attract an audience to buy something, does that piece actually get them to buy? If you're creating a piece, let's say that's going to be a website to give information about your company, does it give that information quickly and concisely? What you have to remember in graphic design is that you literally have seconds to grab someone's attention, make them understand what it is that you're trying to say extremely quickly and effectively. If you can do that in a way that's visually appealing, you've succeeded, because the audience will react to that and react to it very quickly. So part of that is we're going to go ahead and go over what you need to know about this, right? So there's many different ways to start this. And I'm going to go ahead and actually just get started real quick on the elements of design. And I've already discussed a little bit about this. With the elements, you're going to be looking at the size of the document or final piece you're going to be creating, right? What does that mean? Well, if you're designing a banner, and again, you guys can't see this here, but if you're designing a banner that's going to be at a trade show or at a booth, that has special requirements. If you're going to be building a flyer to hand out, to physically hand to someone, it's going to have a completely different scenario, completely different configuration. So everything is based off of inches. Everything is based off of dots per inch. The higher dots per inch, the higher resolution that image happens to be. When you're talking about print work, the higher the resolution, the better. Now, in lots of print work, you want it to be actual size, or at least half the size of the piece that you're going to be creating. You can only blow up an image so big from its original size. So if you're starting with something that is going to be 3 inches wide, and you're going to be going into something that's 8.5 inches wide, that's way too big for the piece that you're going to be using as its final component. So what you need to consider is, okay, is the image the right size for me? You need to consider the dots per inch. So not just my image is 3 inches by 5 inches, height and width. What you also need to worry about is how many dots per inch are we talking about? A 600 DPI image, or dots per inch image, is going to be significantly different than than something that's half the size, but half the dots per inch. So you need to be cognizant of that and the impact that that's going to have on your actual final image. Now, these concepts are a little bit difficult to explain without actual examples, and because of the fact that this is over the web, we don't have really anything that I can use to show you here. But if you happen to have any questions about this, let me know. Now, in the print world, we're talking about dots per inch. It's a completely different configuration in the web. In the web, we're talking about pixels. And the higher the resolution of a photo, and you try to use that particular image within your website, it could be way too big for your website. So you want to shrink it down a little bit. And not just shrink it down. What you want to do is do it in a way that makes sense. So most websites nowadays are 1600 pixels wide by about 1200 pixels high. Why that size? Well, there's many different factors for that. Most screens nowadays, even the laptop that I'm sitting down in front of now, are a 16:9 aspect ratio. What does that mean? Well, that means like if you take a look at your TVs at your house, you either have a square, which is a 4:3 screen, or you have a rectangle, which is a 16:9. Those varying sizes plays a big factor in your final image. So when you're building out a website, you want to build it out for the biggest size and then build a responsive site that'll reduce its size automatically to fit whatever resolution you're actually running on the devices. So that way you don't have to worry about building out multiple versions of your site. A responsive site is going to take care of all those different aspects. Again, all these things you need to think about. So when people start saying, hey, I'm a graphic designer, that means, well, are you a web designer or you're a desktop publisher? All varying career choices that you need to be cognizant of. Now, as we're going through all of these different concepts about how you actually build something out, there's things you need to be cognizant of and consider. Colors. While your particular color may, favorite color may be pink, or maybe orange, or maybe blue, or whatever color it happens to be, does it fit your brand? Does it fit what the audience's expectation is? And that's probably the biggest thing. Many people, and like I was talking about last week, many people choose colors based on their own personal feelings. And sometimes that's great. If you're the target audience, that's phenomenal. But if you're not the target audience, you need to be aware of that and talk to these people and see what they actually think. So that way you're not building something and going down in one direction and then wind up failing simply because you didn't consider the audience's point of view and what they actually want to see. So from that perspective, we need to go ahead and think of that. So there's all types of project types: brochures, newsletters. Now, when we start talking about newsletters specifically, there's a print version of a newsletter, which can be folded, which can be just a 8.5 by 11 double-sided. That can be a brochure style that is like a trifold. Then there's also a web-based brochure and web-based newsletters. Those web-based documents can be really, really cool, and they can actually continue the brand experience and the engagement process with your audience. The more you engage with the audience, the bigger chances you have of them buying what it is that you're trying to sell, regardless of whether it's a product, a service, or just learning more about what it is that you do as an organization. Those pieces should each have their own individual message. So in a newsletter that's going to be delivered in print, you have to be aware of print sizes. Now, how do you go about creating one of these documents, like let's say a newsletter? Well, Microsoft, which produces all kinds of software, has a package called Publisher. Publisher is great because it comes with Office. Office is part of the educational program that Microsoft has, so that way if you're a student, you can actually use Office like Publisher or Word or PowerPoint or Excel or any of these different types of delivery mechanisms to create your actual document. Now, if you use Publisher, what's really cool is that not only can you create your own print version of a newsletter, but they actually have a save as web option as well. And that save as web will allow you to save and export that particular file, either as a PDF or something else, or an HTML page, and saves all the images and everything else. And then allows you to take that and upload it to a server. And you're able to go ahead and publish that and make it accessible to your audience over the web, which is fantastic. You can also take that and strip out the code and place it into an email program like Constant Contact or what's the other one? Campaigner, and several other ones that will allow you to copy HTML tags, paste it in there, and then you'll be able to send that via email to your audience. So the delivery mechanism can be done many ways. As a PDF, which people can download from your website, as an email that can go out through a campaign type system, whether it's email based or whatever the case may be. You can also take that and automatically through these programs share it with an actual Facebook or Twitter or Instagram feed. So all in all, you can take one product that's created for print, save it, and use it throughout the entire life cycle of what it is that you're creating, and then disperse it to the audience however they want. Print, website, email, social media, all in one, and only creating the document once, which saves you a ton of time, which allows you to be able to spend more time selling or picking up the phone and building partnerships or whatever the case may be. So those are several different tools that you can use, because that's, I think, something that a lot of people were interested in last week, was the types of tools you can use, and some of the different things you can use to make your life easier. Now, in that regard, when you're creating graphic design elements, there are services out there, for example, iStockPhoto and several other websites that allow you to download photographs that are called stock photography. Stock photography or stock images can be anything from an actual image that someone takes a photograph of, uploads it to one of these services, and allows you to download it and use it for your own graphic design tools or elements, right? There's licenses available for that, and there's royalty-free, there's royalty-based. Typically, when you're creating these types of things, you want to stick with royalty-free images, which means you pay a credit or some small fee for using the file, and that's all you have to worry about. So there's no other payments that are going to be necessary to be made to the person that created this image for you. Now, with that though, there's a possibility that someone else, either in the past or in the future, will use that same image. So you want to constantly be going out there and refreshing the images that you use. There's also stock photography CDs you can buy that have like hundreds of images, and you pay one small price for the CD, which makes it really accessible and really easy for you. Now, another tool for when you're building a composition, and what I mean by that is you're going to build a comp of a temporary version of a document to maybe do a proof of concept. In other words, you're going to create a flyer or a banner or whatever the case may be and show that idea, that concept, to people that you know or are the target audience, right? And you're going to say, hey, look, what do you think of this? Does this give you whatever motivation you're looking for? Does it compel you to buy? Does it give the message clearly? And then you can purchase whatever images you need to purchase to make it happen. Now, when we're talking about stock photography, there are things called rasterized files. Rasterized files are things like images that are JPEGs, GIF files or GIF files, depending on how you want to pronounce it. There's PNG files, there's TIFF files, there's many different formats. Typically, again, if you're using a image for print, you want to use the highest resolution image. So you want to use a TIFF file typically, at least 300 DPI, and I want to stress that. The more dots per inch, the clearer the photo will be. Not only that, but it can be a small photo that you can blow up bigger, and that's always important. Besides a rasterized file, another file format is a vector. You use programs like Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW, and other ones as well. There's many different tools out there in design that allow you to create a vector image. A vector image is basically line-based drawings that you're able to create. It can look any way you want. I've done some vector images, and vector images I use to create logos, which allow you to take a file size that is about this big and blow it up as big as a wall without any kind of degradation in the image, which means that you don't lose any look and feel. You have none of the little, like if you take a picture that you take with a camera, like, and you save it for the web, it's a very small picture, and if you start to blow it up, you can start seeing all these little dots and all these different little like weird looking things that happen with a picture that makes it look like it's just ugly. And the bigger you make it, the more that happens, and you can actually see that the image is actually not really nice. So with vector, you don't need to worry about that. It scales as big as you want or as small as you want without losing any of the quality of the image. So if you're creating a logo, you want to make sure that you're creating a logo in some kind of vector-based program like Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW or Flash or any of these other programs. And then what you're able to do is save that after you create it, okay? And then you're able to save that as a EPS file, which you can then use for print. Or you can save it as a PNG file, which means it's a transparent file. And that means you can have the picture of the logo with no background in it, which is really cool because it allows you to do all kinds of different things with that particular image. So let's take a look here and say I have a question that probably is pertinent here. It says, Aaron wants to know if you need to pay for images you're using from the internet if you're not making a profit from them. Well, Aaron, that's a very good question. So the best way to answer this is if you're making a proof of concept image. Okay, so you're going to create something for school, or you're going to create something that you want to show to some people to give them an idea of what you're talking about before you buy it to then use it for your business. Yes, you can use those images without paying for them, but if you're going to use it in any other way, and I want to be very clear, if you're going to use it in a way that is going to take that image and you reproduce it and hand it out to grow your business in any way, shape, or form, that means on a website, on a newsletter, or whatever the case may be, you do need to either compensate the artist, or an artist is a photographer or someone that creates the file for you, or you need to ask them for permission and say, hey, do you mind if I use this for my school project or for my business, and once I get off the ground, I'll pay you X amount of dollars. Typically, if it's an artist that's also in school, they're not going to have an issue with that, but you need to ask. And that's probably the biggest thing that many people don't do, is they don't ask. The most common problem that I've seen with images and the creation of brochures or graphics of any kind for the web or whatever the case may be is people will go to Google, they'll do a search on images, they'll find something that they like, and then they'll just copy it and paste it into their document and use it. Now, that is not the right way to go about it. And it's not the right way because then because people wind up thinking that you're taking credit for that image, the creation of that image, or they're thinking that you paid that particular person for use of that image. And that's a very tangled web that you wind up getting involved in. And if you do that, you could wind up being approached by the artist or the creator of that image, and they'll be like, hey, please stop using this. I've actually seen many people receive cease and desist letters from a lawyer that'll basically say, you're using my image without my permission, without any kind of compensation, you must stop immediately. So don't do it unless you're doing it for school or to prove a concept. And once the concept is proven and you know that this is the type of image you want to use, or this is the image I want to use, reach out to that particular artist, whether it's a photographer or someone that's creating the image, and either pay them, and the fees are typically not much. Typically, you can go to one of those sites like iStock Photo or Dreamstime or any of those other websites that allow you to download stock photography, and those artists will be there. And they will typically have the same exact image on several different sites because they want to make as much money as possible. Those fees range from a couple dollars per image to several $100s per image, depending on what you're using it for and what the license is for. So again, look for royalty-free images, Aaron, okay? That's the most important thing that I can tell you. Royalty-free images means you pay once, you never have to pay again, and you can use that image over and over again as long as you paid the initial fee for the image. I hope I answered your question, Aaron, and if you have any other questions, please let me know. Fantastic. So, what is the dividing line between a graphic designer and a web designer? Both of them are going to have the same types of education, but they're not going to have the same responsibilities. A graphic designer is typically someone that can create print-ready images. And that's really it. They can create a nice looking brochure. Now, a web designer is someone that knows the ins and outs of web design. Okay? Web design means there's different browsers you need to keep in consideration. There's file size limitations. There's cross-browser compatibility. What looks one way on one browser like Internet Explorer will look completely different somewhere else, and that means on Chrome, on Firefox, or any other browser, and there are dozens of browsers out there. All right, so we can talk about, I mean, there's Opera, there's Safari with your Macs, there's all kinds of different ones, there's Dolphin, I mean, I can go over all these different versions of browsers. Each one of them have a different configuration, all things you want to be cognizant of when you're creating these things. Now, some examples of really good logo design, because this is extremely important. We need to consider what it is that the logo is going to be doing. The logo is going to give people a really quick idea visually of what it is your company does. Let's take a look at AT&T. Let's take a look at Sprint. Let's take a look at Verizon Wireless. All cellular communication companies, and all of them use the same type of little swooshes that that basically give you the idea that they're sending communications over some kind of wave. Okay, and if you take a look at ads, what I do on a daily basis, whenever I'm watching TV or whenever I'm looking at magazines or newspapers or reading things on Facebook or Twitter or whatever the case may be, I sit back and I actually look at what's being presented and how, and I take a look at what appeals to me. I have my own favorite colors. I like grays and blues, as you can see from my shirt. So my own personal taste is different than what your taste would be, and also let's say Doug over here who's filming this, you know, his tastes are going to be completely different. But again, when you're creating a logo, you need to create something that is going to give everyone in your audience the same message. That message is, my company does X. It gives you a really quick idea of what they do. Very simple, very easy to read. Logos need to be crisp and clean. Some design ideas that a lot of new designers use, and this is, there's nothing wrong with this, but you have to consider an image that's going to be on a billboard is going to be a completely different look and feel than something that's going to be on a business card. Okay, so let's take a look real quick, and let's take a look at a business card here. Let's see if I have one on here. Here, you know what? As a matter of fact, right here's a gift card. Same size approximately, right? It's an Amazon gift card. You see that A right there? It's very, very distinct. You know it's Amazon. Everyone knows the Amazon A. Has a smiley face on it. Did you ever notice that was a little smiley face on there? It gives you the impression that, hey, this is a company that's friendly and easy to work with. And no, I'm not going to give you the code on the back of this because it's my Amazon card. But this is what you're working with. Now, this A on this particular Amazon gift card, and you can see as you zoom in here, it has the same up top there as it does on the A, but they keep consistent. The fonts are the same, the colors are the same. They keep it really simple and easy to use. You can very quickly. So from that, then you have different purposes, right? So let's take a look at this one. Sheets. I think most people here in Pennsylvania have a Sheets card. Just tells you real simple what it is, right? So again, this logo, whether it's small, whether it's big, whatever the case may be, it needs to be legible from whatever distance you're going to be at. When you're looking at this face to face, it needs to be easy to read. So what does that mean? Some design tips as far as this is concerned. Which one is easier to read? Which one tells you what it is that you have? This one for Sheets, and that's okay, because it's just information. It's just telling you. It's really easy to see what it is. On my keychain, it has the exact same logo. Amazon, this is a gift card. So it's really easy to see what it is that you're using it for and what it is that you are trying to accomplish here. Now, those things are extremely important. So how do you make something that's going to be able to be legible small and legible really big? Well, that means not having too many gradients. Gradients are great if you have control of the page, okay? So if you use a gradient or a drop shadow or some kind of other element that adds a layer to make it pop and make it look three-dimensional, remember, when it's really big, that'll look awesome. But when it's really small on a business card, it may be very difficult to read. Readability is extremely important. Also keep in mind colors. Green and blue. Very common colors that people like to use a lot. And like I mentioned last week though, I think the percentage is 60% of men are actually colorblind, which means that they're green-blue colorblind. So they can't tell the difference between green and blue. All they see is gray. So you have to keep that in mind when you're creating these particular pieces, and keep in mind what it is that you're going to be using it for. If a person can't read your logo, if a person can't read your message, you failed. Go for simple. White space on a billboard or on a brochure is not a bad thing. So your homework, after everything is said and done here, is I want you to sit back and do like I do. Look at commercials, but don't tell your parents I gave you permission to do this. Look at commercials, whether they're on the internet or whether they're on your Facebook feed, and it all depends if you're 13-year-old or if you have Facebook. But all these different places where you go maybe to the doctor's office and you see magazines, or you go to Dave & Buster's, or you go out ice skating, or whatever the case may be, there's going to be images everywhere. Look and see what images work in your opinion. Write down, I have a little notebook where I write down all my ideas. I like this, I like that. I see all these different things all the time that inspire me to create something, that give me ideas. You should be writing all these things down. Writing them down and then trying to apply them to your own ideas. Now, does that mean that you're stealing? No. It doesn't mean you're stealing. It means that you're becoming inspired by something. Typically, I'll start with an idea that I saw maybe based off of someone else's work. And I'm like, hey man, that's pretty cool. I would really like to see that maybe done this way. And I take it to the next level. And I work with it until it becomes my own thing. So keep that in mind. Look out there, billboards. Every time you're in your car with your parents or you're going from one place to another, look at billboards, look at signage. Let's take a look at just billboards, okay? So now when you go out there, there's digital billboards and there's traditional print billboards. Look at the difference between the two. And the way the images are, they're completely different. A print billboard is meant to be static, but a digital billboard can have some really cool imagery that can maybe slide in and out and can do different things. Also, if you go on the web and you're looking at different websites, you know, Nicktoons or whatever the case may be, you can see that there are advertisements, and some of those advertisements, all graphic designed. Okay, that means that someone designed those images. They actually sat down and thought about, does this image, whether it's an ad, whether it's a logo, whether it's just a page that's on the website, does this fit with everything else? And if it doesn't fit with everything else, is that a bad thing? If you're calling out something so that way it pops off the page and makes people look at that immediately, that may be okay as long as it doesn't affect the rest of the brand. Also, there are things on web pages called calls to action. Those calls to action are extremely important because that's when you're telling someone, hey, I want you to do something. The call to action could be to download a PDF, or download a file, subscribe to a newsletter, learn more about something, okay? Those calls to action can quite literally be anything you want it to be, as long as you're asking them to do something, and if you're asking them to, let's say, take a survey, that you give them something in return, okay? There's many school-based websites out there where you can actually download material that will be beneficial to your schoolwork. What they do is they say, hey, we'll give you this as long as you take a survey. And that's completely fine as long as you get your parents' permission, of course. And they are aware of what's going on. But also be aware that when you're going out there looking at these things, you don't download any viruses or anything else. The web is full of these things and things that look like they may be educational. If you don't know, ask. But again, graphic design boils down to something very, very simple. Does it tell the message of what it is that you're trying to say? Is it visually appealing? Is it something that people want to look at? Does it fit the brand? Your brand, whatever that happens to be. If you're selling a product, if you're selling a service, if you're selling just information, does it get the message across? And if it does, you've done your job. And then that means you need to give them a call to action. That call to action is to get them to do something. What is that something? You need to define what that is. Think about it, okay? And the biggest thing I can say is take your time, do the research. Go out there and see what the competition is doing. If you are creating a graphic brochure, flyer, a newsletter, whatever the case may be, find out what the purpose is, okay? A newsletter delivers information. That information needs to be appropriate to the audience. It needs to be visually appealing and easy to read. You don't want a lot of information just thrown at these people. The biggest issue I've seen with newsletters is it's just full of text, which is great if that is what you're trying to do. But oftentimes, people look at a newsletter to just deliver information in easily digestible chunks. If they want to learn more, you can give them a link to learn more. That link can be just a simple URL, which means it's a link to a particular page, which could be a landing page or a very specific page on your website. Or it can be on an actual newsletter that's going to be on the web, a direct link that you click on, and it takes them to that site. Now, when you're going through this, another question I know someone's going to have is, can you just borrow someone else's articles if you're building a newsletter? No. Unless you get someone's permission first, you cannot just do that. And yes, typically you have to pay to use someone else's intellectual property, which is a fancy way of saying their concepts and their ideas and the way that they wrote it. Okay? Very simple. The cost may be nothing more than a plug on your website, or it could be cash. Either way, you have to work it out with that particular person. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up to see if there's any more questions real quick, and then I'll move on to the next section. No, nothing good. Well, last week we had too many questions, and this week it's going a lot smoother. I think I'm doing a good job of making sure I answer everyone's questions beforehand. Oh, man. So sizing. We went over sizing a little bit, and we went over how we go about doing some of this graphic design work, right? So you can use tools to do it yourself. Oftentimes, if you're an entrepreneur, and that's what this is about, right? Everyone here is looking to either become an entrepreneur or find out how to get into the job market doing these things. You can do it yourself, which is great if you are a graphic designer by trade, or you can hire somebody else to do it for you. Now, the tools that you'll need for this type of thing, again, is Adobe Creative Services or Creative Suite. There's a new way that you can get a hold of this software. It used to be like $2,000 for this software, ridiculous amount of money, and you had to pay for it every time that they had a release, which is just astronomically expensive. And as a professional designer, it was way too much for me to be able to pay unless I was charging my clients significantly more. Now, what they did instead was they said, hey, we'll give you access to this software for a monthly fee. And we'll update it all the time for free. You don't have to do anything. All you got to do is pay your monthly fee. It's a really affordable way to do it. And while you're in school, school means junior high, high school, college, and college goes all the way until you finish your master's or your PhD. You can still pay those student rates, which is really, really, really cheap. So that's a very good way to go about it. While you're in school, take advantage of these savings because these tools are ridiculously expensive otherwise. You still can buy the CDs and the DVDs for it, but I would not recommend that you do it because it's extremely expensive. So when we start talking about how there's flyers, there's and there's websites, and we talked about pixels. In print, we're talking about inches, okay? So remember, if you're going to be creating a flyer, you can create something that's really straightforward, like 8.5 by 11, like a regular sheet of paper. And it's front and back or just front, and really simple. You can get crazy, though. You can do some really, really cool things. So how do you do that? Well, you can actually go to a printer. These printing agencies all have samples of paper stock of every different type of style you can think of. Everything from vellum, the parchment, to transparent paper stock that you can then print either directly on your home computer, and you can go to Office Max, you can go to Office Depot, you can go to Staples, and you can take a look at all these different paper choices. There's an extraordinary amount of paper choices out there nowadays, so don't think that you're stuck to the paper that you get at school, that 8.5 by 11 white sheet of paper, and you're like, what do I do with this? Well, I mean, you can be really creative and do some really cool things with color and stuff, but you can simply create a black or gray text on a nice translucent, what does that mean? That means you can kind of see through it, but not all the way. It's not transparent. And there's all kinds of different translucency levels and all kinds of thickness variations that you can buy that will allow you to create something visually stunning, like a brochure that just has a couple of pieces of information, a logo and contact information, to a business card that all is joined together along with envelopes and tying an entire stationery package together. When you were talking about creating a stationery package, that's something that's really old school but still relevant. People still send mail. I know, not email, snail mail. I don't believe it. It's crazy, but they still do it. So you need to be cognizant of that. And snail mail is extremely expensive depending on what you're doing, but if all you're going to do is take a piece of paper, print on it, fold it up and put it into a regular envelope, which is a number 10 envelope that you can use for anything, or even one of those big, manila envelopes that are like 9 by 12. It becomes extremely affordable to send those out. And it's a good way to get a lot of information and personalized messages. So when you're creating these things, we need to be considerate of the reason why we're creating it. Don't just create it to create it. If you're building a relationship with someone and you're using graphic design to send out a message, that can be something as simple as a thank you letter. People don't send those out too often anymore, but they're very effective because it makes people feel, hey, this guy took the time to sit down, or this lady took the time to sit down and create a personal letter to me and sign it. You know what? As a matter of fact, what I want you to do this weekend is write a letter to the president. This is really cool. Okay, every one of you, just write a letter to the president saying something. You'll get a response back, and it'll look like it's actually signed by the president. It very well it could be. You never know. But that's the type of thing that people get and makes them feel important, makes them feel like you care. And when you're building a business and when you're trying to communicate a message, those little types of steps that you take to personalize it will add a layer of credibility to you, add a layer of credibility to your business, and make people feel like you actually care. And a lot of you really do care. Get that message across. Make sure that they understand it. So I'm going to take a little break here and see if there's any questions. Everything seems to be going pretty smoothly today. Awesome. Last week I was killed with questions, and that's okay. So we talked about transparency in graphic design, right? We talked about transparent logos that have nothing in the background, and you can make it look like anything you want to. We talked about papers that had opacities or transparencies or translucencies, right? But what else can we do with paper? Paper is really cool because you can buy textures. There's papers that you can actually buy that have actual textures to them. Oh, what I was saying earlier is you can go to a print shop and you can ask them for a book, a sample book of all the different types of paper that they have. And it quite literally looks like a little book, 3-ring binder, and you can flip through all these different paper choices. And then you can say, hey, I want to buy a ream of this type of paper. And they'll actually cut it down to size to whatever you want for your particular printer. Or you can have them print it for you. But texture plays a big factor, especially if you're creating a business that is based off of texture. Like let's say you want to, you're a carpet installer and you want paper that's really thick and has some type of feeling to it that gives you the feel of maybe, hey, this actually kind of feels like carpet, or this kind of looks and feels like tile, or whatever the case may be. Things to be thinking about. Along with that, there's a process called die cutting. Die cutting is really cool. This is one of my favorite things. So you can build a folder and you can cut out little lines in the pockets, and that's where you stick your business cards in. Or you can create a die cut that actually takes a sheet of paper or a business card and cuts off angles, okay? So that way your business card now has its own individual shape, and each one of them are different. For example here, I'm going to show you one of the cards that I have here as an example. All right, so now a standard business card is 2.5 by 3 inches. This is a little bit different, okay? This actually is a much different size, and I'll show you the size difference here with my Giant Eagle card. So as you can see, let's go back here, significantly smaller in size than our traditional business card. Why? Well, I was trying to make someone pay attention to the business card. They're like, oh, wait a minute, this is completely different. This gives me an idea. So be thinking about those things of how you can make things different and get people interested. So Brianna asked if you were talking about the U.S. president or president of a company. Yes, actually, I was talking about the U.S. president just because it's actually really cool. So when I got married, I actually invited the president at the time to my wedding. And I knew the president wasn't going to come. But what I have is a letter from the president that says, congratulations on your marriage. And it was signed, you know, Mr. President. And it was a pretty cool. It was a pretty cool thing because now we have that in our photo album of our wedding, to where the president of the United States was like, hey, you know. Now, this is just an exercise for fun for you guys, so you can see the impact, and you can also see how the government is using letters to communicate to the people. And that could be anyone. You can send it to a congressman, you can send it to a senator, you can send it to a governor, whatever the case may be, a mayor, and each one of them will respond to you. Now, if you send it via email, chances are they're going to send you an email back. But if you take the time to actually send them a letter, you will get a letter back in return, which is just awesome. It's really, really cool. And so any government official will do it. But getting something from the president is even better. So, you know, those are all things to consider. So any other questions real quick before I move on to the next subject? Because it took a little bit of time with that. All right, so we went over all these different things you need to consider. And I threw out a lot of different terms. And I gave you a couple little fun assignments that you can do when you go out this weekend with your parents, or, you know, over the next couple evenings with your friends, or whatever the case may be. Look at not just what appeals to you, but also talk to your friends and talk to your family about, hey, what do you think about that particular billboard? Or, hey, take a look at this ad in this magazine. Do you like this? I really think it's cool. But not just I think it's cool. Why is it cool? Is it the picture? Is it the colors? Is it the typography? Typography is, again, it's just fonts, right? There's all kinds of different varying fonts, right, that you can have on here. Let's take a look. Let me see if I can pull out a couple other examples. So take a look at that. You see that logo on there. For you, with your compliments, is really easy to read, but the actual logo itself is really, really hard to read. Keep that in mind, especially if someone wears glasses. Now, I wear glasses when I drive because I have a problem seeing far away. But oftentimes, people also have problems seeing up close. So keep that in mind when you're building these things out. The audience is different. Everyone looks at different things and has different experiences. So make sure that you keep as many people in mind when you create whatever it is you're creating it for. And keep in mind that whenever you're creating these things, that there's an actual mission behind it. There's a plan behind it. There's something that you're trying to communicate. And use all of the elements of design throughout the entire process. Okay? Color. Clarity, you want to be very, very crystal clear what it is that you're trying to say. Fonts, something I didn't touch on, I'm going to touch on now. Don't put too many different fonts on one image. I can tell you right now, I'm seeing some boo-boos throughout this office. There's a poster right in front of me, I'm looking at it right now, which is violating one of the terms of good graphic design. And that is having no more than 2 to 3 fonts on one poster, because it becomes hard for people to read. Now, it's very different in this case because they're trying to draw attention to many different important words, and that's a different meaning behind that, so that's okay. But you want to try to use the same fonts, or, you know, and bold them or italicize them. And again, italicize is when you take something that's straight and just turn it on its edge a little bit. You can add a drop shadow, but be very careful. Too many drop shadows will make things really hard to read. Also keep a look at what color is on your particular image that you're creating, and how does that work with the rest of the thing that you're creating. Here, I'm going to show you. GameStop, right? I think every single person in this class here uses GameStop probably at some point. Easy to read. It's a black card. It says a white game, red stop. That is carried through everything they do. Take a look at magazines. Go into GameStop and see how they use this logo. I didn't give you guys permission to spend money, but go and take a look at these different magazines that have GameStop logos in them. They're everywhere, and they have the same thing. Take a look at that. All right? 2 fonts, bold, thin, and that's it. It gets the message across very clearly. So think about that whenever you're creating anything. Giant Eagle has the logo, Advantage card, 2 fonts. There's a layer of consistency here, okay, that every single one of these keeps in mind, and you need to do the same thing. The reason why I don't like this Sheets card is because of the fact that there's 3 different fonts and they're drastically different. It makes it difficult to focus on what's important. So this is a failure in my opinion, but again, it's just a Sheets card, and the end game is to find it easily in your wallet. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up to a couple more questions. Remember, ease of use. Make sure you think before you just start to create. Come up with a plan. Think about what the purpose is of the creation that you're trying to make. If it's a brochure, think inches, okay? Standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Now, real quick, I know we only have a couple minutes. How do you create a full bleed on a page? What does full bleed mean? When the color goes all the way out, just like on this, right? And you don't see any of the white around it. The number one question most students ask me, how do you do that? Well, when you're creating this stuff, you want to build a bleed around it. So if it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you're going to build it and 1/4 of an inch thicker all the way around. And you're going to have no fonts touching the edge. So that way, when you cut it, you can either cut it with one of those little, I forget what they're called. Like, you can take it to a print shop and they'll actually cut it for you with a digital cutter, or you can slice it with one of those papers that you have at Kinko's or whatever the case may be. Paper cutters. There you go. Very simple. Paper cutter. And what you're able to do with that is make it so that way it goes all the way to the edge of the paper. Simple process, but it's always something that people are like, how do you do that? How do you make it go to the edge? Well, it takes a little bit of thinking and planning. Like everything else I've been talking about today, think and plan. Make sure that you're looking at the messaging. Make sure that you're taking a look at the brand. Make sure that you're sticking to the brand and the message very, very clearly, very concisely, and make sure that you are delivering the message that works to get them to take action. In the end, that's the most important thing. The action has to be very direct. Call, click, email, whatever it is, get them to do something. Because every time that they do something, you've been successful. Alrighty, well, if there's no more questions, we're going to go ahead and end just a minute early here, but that's okay. And again, like last time, if you do happen to have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to Brian or Mike, and they'll get the information over to me, and then I'll be more than happy to help you and answer any questions. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.